My name is Jacqueline Basham. I'm from Western Kentucky University. We're with the College of Health and Human Services, the Department of Public Health, and the Center for Environmental and Workplace Health. I've been working on these studies since 2012, so we've done quite a few of the commodity flow studies. We're going to go over the fixed facility information, the placard survey that was done on I-71, as well as the placard survey that was done on the railway that runs through Oldham County. This slide just kind of tells you a little bit of the overview. We're going to look at truck frequencies, composition of the hazardous materials that were transported, as well as the recommended responses for each one of these. So the I-71 placard survey was done July 10th through July 21st of 2017. The sampling locations were on northbound and southbound rest areas on I-71. There were 80 total monitoring hours, 40 hours southbound, 40 hours northbound. These were only done, it's important to note, Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. So this is a very brief snapshot of what's going through. This wasn't done for a whole year, or it wasn't done, 24 hours a day. It's a brief snapshot of what's going through. So 722 total hazmat trucks were recorded. That's 9.03 hazmat trucks per hour. The northbound was 337, southbound 385. They're pretty close to even. There's not like a whole bunch on north and not south. They're pretty close. 8.43 on northbound hazmat trucks per hour, 9.63 hazmat trucks per hour on southbound, so slightly more southbound. So we don't simply just look at what's going through. We look at frequencies by day of the week. We'll also look at frequencies by time of day. Both of those are really important to know, just because a lot of areas have volunteer firefighters, or they have more people on staff certain days of the week than they do other days of the week. So it's important to know what days you may need people available to respond to emergencies. It's also important to know what time of days that you may need people to respond to emergencies. Are they going through at the lunch hour? Is that when you're seeing most people go through? Which could be a problem with responding, especially if you've got a large amount of traffic on the road. So are they going through at a time that would be considered rush hour? So we look at all of that. So what we found is on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday had the highest average hazmat truck frequency per hour, between 10 and 11 trucks. Monday and Friday had the lowest hazmat truck frequency per hour. It was 7 and then 5 on Friday. So Friday had the least amount. Monday was next. So mainly the middle of the week is when you're seeing a lot of your hazmat trucks go through. That's what we saw in our snapshot. This basically sums that up a little better and divides it out by southbound and northbound. You can see that southbound's highest was on Wednesday, northbound's highest was tied on Tuesday, Thursday, but it's all pretty similar. You can see Monday and Friday have a pretty drastic decrease. So middle of the week is when you're generally seeing these trucks go through that are carrying the hazardous materials. That's something else important to note. We only recorded trucks carrying hazardous materials. This is not all trucks going through. It's specific to that, specific to trucks that had placards. The highest number of hazmat trucks were seen in the late morning hours, which we considered 9 a.m. to 10:59 a.m. And the lowest number of trucks were seen in the midday hours, 11 a.m. to 12:59 p.m., which would be around lunchtime. Both northbound and southbound lane followed this trend. Again, we're seeing the same things on both sides. It's not that one has more than the other, or one is showing different times than the other, which sometimes does happen depending on the area, depending on where the trucks are going to and from. And again, this is a chart that better summarizes that. The higher, that's the total, the one that you see that's a lot higher. And then orange is southbound and red's northbound. It's pretty much even across the day. So that means from 7 to 8:59, I assume you all have a lot of the Louisville traffic at that time and in the afternoon. I'm not from here, so not positive, but I'm sure that you have a lot of traffic in that time, which when you have a lot of traffic means that there's an increased likelihood of accidents. And if you've got a lot of trucks going through at that time, then that can increase the likelihood of a hazmat accident occurring or a hazmat release occurring. So the 7 to 8:59, there were 87 trucks northbound, 78 trucks southbound, and then starting the hours where people are starting to leave work and go home, there was 96 and 91. So definitely quite a bit of trucks on the hazmat trucks on the road during those times. So this is looking at what we saw, what the placards indicated the trucks were carrying. Gasoline was the most frequent transported hazardous material for both the north and southbound lanes. It made up 20.81% and 18.69% of the materials being transported. Next was diesel fuel, was the second most frequently transported hazardous material. If I assume everybody has access to the report, or some people have access to the report, there's a complete list in the appendices that show everything that was recorded on there, and gives a more thorough overview of exactly what we saw. But these were the top two. If you go to the next slide, this shows a few more. 1203, 1993. I can't tell you all of these off the top of my head. I'm pretty sure 3082 is elevated temperature liquid. I was trying to look on. 1075 is propane, butane, kerosene, that kind of thing. 1263, I'm not positive what it is. I've known it before. But again, this shows you exactly how many we recorded. So there were 74 trucks recorded in this 80 monitoring hours, or 40 monitoring hours for southbound. There were 74 gasoline trucks. There were 25 diesel trucks. 19 elevated temperature liquid trucks. And again, there's more thorough analysis of that in the actual report. Go on. And this is looking at the northbound side. Again, you have about the same. 1203, 1993 are going to be your top two. I know when we looked at fixed facilities, that's what a lot of the trucks being shipped through the fixed facilities were for gasoline and diesel fuel. So I think that probably accounts for a lot of why you see higher amounts of those. So recommended responses to frequently transported materials. These are specifically telling you if a spill was to occur with the materials that we saw in the highest levels, what response would be needed. The most frequent guide number for both north and southbound lanes was 128, which is for flammable liquids. It was 38.58% and 32.21%. That's a third of what we saw going through would have this response guide number. So it's important to remember that you need trainings for that response. That way everyone is aware of what would happen if a spill was to occur. Other frequent guide numbers that we saw for both north and southbound lanes included 120, which is gases, including refrigerated liquids. We saw 154, which is substances that are toxic and or corrosive but non-combustible. And then 171, which are substances that are a low to moderate hazard. So this is moving on to the railroad. That was the main things we saw for I-71. We'll talk a little bit more, bring this all together more in the fixed facilities part at the end. The railroad placard survey was completed June 19th through June 30th. Again, this is a small snapshot. It was also done Monday through Friday from 7 to 3. The sampling location was south of Oldham County Courthouse in LaGrange, and there were 80 total monitoring hours, so 10 days, so 2 Mondays through 2 Fridays. So 163 total hazardous material railcars were seen. That's 2.04 hazmat railcars per hour. And again, we were just looking at specifically placarded train railcars. Eastbound and westbound, there was 105. Eastbound, there was 58 westbound. So there is quite a few more going eastbound. And you'll see that all throughout when we're looking at the railroad information, that eastbound has a lot heavier traffic on the railways of hazmat than westbound does. 1.31 hazmat rail cars per hour versus 0.73 hazmat rail cars per hour. Again, we're going to look at frequencies by day of the week and time of day. Monday had the highest average hazmat railcar frequency per hour, which is interesting because it's completely different than what the interstate was, because Monday was one of the lowest for the interstate, but it's the highest for the railroad. I think that's interesting, at least. It had the highest average hazmat railcar frequency of 3.06 per hour. Tuesday had the lowest average hazmat railcar frequency per hour. And if you'll go to the next slide, it should, does it show? Yeah. If you go to the next slide, this breaks it down eastbound versus westbound. You can see there was only 2 recorded on Tuesday for westbound, and then all the way to 23 on Monday. Wednesday, eastbound had a slightly higher than on Monday, so Wednesday would be another day. Again, you can see that eastbound has a lot more than westbound. 17 and 15 on Friday. Pretty much all through the week you've got rail cars going through here that have hazardous materials on them. So the highest number of hazmat rail cars were seen in the afternoon hours. Again, a little different than what we saw on the interstate. It was 1 to 2:59 p.m. is what we indicated as the afternoon hours. The lowest number were seen in the late morning hours, which was the high amount for I-71, was from 9 to 10:59. Eastbound followed this trend, while westbound had a slightly higher amount in the early morning hours than the afternoon hours, but they're pretty similar if you look at the chart on the next slide. You can see here that it's divided out by the time periods of eastbound, westbound, and then total. But you can see that the early morning hours were very much the time when a lot of these rail cars were going through. The early morning hours or the late afternoon hours. In the middle of the day, you're not seeing a whole lot going through.
During the study period.
Yeah, during the snapshot that we took. It was mainly early morning, late afternoon. Which again is when a lot of people are on the road. There's a lot of people out and active, especially during the week, which is when we observed. Propane, butane, or other flammable gases were the most frequently transported hazardous materials. It was 17.18% of the total load. Other frequently transported hazmats on rail cars included sodium hydroxide, hydrochloric acid, and benzene, which all of those could be extremely dangerous substances if something were to happen. Benzene was seen at 6.75% of the total load, which is quite a bit if you think about what could happen. Same thing with hydrochloric acid at 7.36%. And then this again sums up everything that we saw. The other category accounts for less than, I think, 3%. Each one of the separate in the other accounted for less than 3%. So that's how we categorize that. 1075, again, that's the 1075 would be propane, butane, kerosene. 1824 would be the sodium hydroxide. And then 1789 is hydrochloric acid, and 1114 is the benzene. So again, we're going to look at the recommended responses that would be needed. These again are ones that in the snapshot we took would be good to have trainings on, just because there's a lot of that going through. So it is different. These are different guide numbers on the railroads versus the interstate. You're seeing completely different things going through. Not completely different things, completely different amounts of things going through. 115 was the most frequent guide number for rail cars. This is gases that are flammable, including refrigerated liquids. It was 17.18%. You also have other frequent guide numbers. These accounted for more than 5% of the total load going through, these guide numbers did. So 127, flammable liquids. You have 154, toxic and or corrosive, non-combustible. 157, pretty much the same thing as 151, except these are water sensitive ones. And then 130, which is flammable liquids that are non-polar. They can be water, immiscible, and then noxious. So there's quite a bit going on the railroads in the snapshot that we saw, at least. This is the composition of the recommended ERG guide numbers for rail cars. It's basically just chart form of what I've just told you. So the 115 is 17.18%, 127 9.2, and then 154 is 7.98%. So the fixed facility surveys. So these questionnaires were emailed out to fixed facilities in July 2017. There were a total of 10 that were returned. 7 of those were considered usable. So what we're looking at, when we're looking at the data, it was from the 7 usable questionnaires that were returned and assessed. The 3 others that were returned indicated they did not ship or receive hazardous materials on a yearly basis. The information requested, we look at frequency of the hazmat shipments, we look at routine of hazmat shipments, total quantities, origins and destinations, so where are they coming from, where are they going to. We look at timing of when they're doing this, as well as the composition and trends in hazmat shipments. So there were 4 locations reported within these 7 usable surveys. 3 were in Buckner, 2 were in LaGrange, 1 was in Prospect, and 1 was in Crestwood. So this is listing those specific placarded trucks by facility. Thornton's is listed twice on here, and I know everybody's like, why is it listed twice? But there's 2 different locations, and so that's why it was 2 different surveys that were turned in for 2 different places. So it's counted as 2 different fixed facilities. There's several others that are on here. There's a propane company, a power cooperative. But you can see the specific ones that are listed. Thornton's by far is receiving the most. And that's where you're getting all your gasoline, all your diesel fuels that you're seeing on there. That's what I was talking about. They have almost 2,200 trucks that they're receiving each year. It's quite a few if you look at, and then Suburban Propane, that's where a lot of your shipments of propane is going out. You have 375. This is looking at the total tonnage that was reported by, and remember all of this is self-reported by the fixed facilities. It's not like we went in and looked at anything. This is what they're self-reporting. The total tonnage of yearly shipped and or received is gradually going up. You're gradually getting more and more of this going through the county, all the way from approximately 25,000 tons in 2011 to almost 40,000 tons in 2016. There was a little bit of a drop in 2012, but since 2013, it's going up more and more and more of what you're seeing, hazardous materials tonnage that you're seeing shipped through here. So this is looking at time and space patterns. Again, that's important to know when you need to have emergency responders available, where they need to be available at. 2 facilities reported shipping hazardous materials Monday through Friday, while no facilities reported shipping on Saturday or Sunday. And then 4 facilities indicated no routine for the time of day of shipments. 1 facility reported 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. is when they shipped them. But what you can see kind of from all of those results is that the facilities ship when they deem necessary. There's not necessarily a set pattern. There's not a set schedule for this. So it can be very variable of when these shipments are going in and out. 3 facilities reported receiving, so all of that was shipping out. This is what they're receiving in. 3 facilities reported receiving hazardous materials only Monday through Friday. 2 facilities reported receiving hazardous materials 7 days of the week. So if you remember, both the placard surveys for I-71 and for the railway were just Monday through Friday. They were not done on the weekend. So there could be even more that we would have seen if we had looked at Saturday and Sunday as well, because of these 2 facilities that are receiving hazardous materials on those days. 6 facilities indicated no routine for the time of day. Again, you have the one facility that 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. is when they're receiving those hazardous materials. Again, both results indicate facilities receive when they deem necessary. So it's very variable. It's not necessarily a set schedule. One of the other interesting things, 2 of the 7 facilities indicated they did ship and receive hazmats on legal holidays. The reason this may be a cause of concern is because it's low traffic days generally. Trucks can drive at a much higher rate of speed, which increases the chance of incidents occurring. Also, one of the 7 facilities indicated they considered climatic conditions. Only one of the 7 considered climatic conditions when shipping or receiving hazardous materials, which is a cause for concern because if you have slick roadways caused by rain or snow, this can increase the chances of an incident as well. So if you can get fixed facilities to consider climatic conditions when shipping and receiving, you can sometimes cut down on the amount of incidents that could occur. So this is the fixed facilities material data analysis. This is what they reported were either being shipped or received from their facilities. Diesel fuel was reported the most frequently, followed by gasoline and kerosene. Again, Thornton's was a large contributor to the gasoline and diesel fuel that are being shipped and received through this area. 42.86% was other things that are being shipped. They accounted for less than 10% of the total. 28.75 was the diesel fuel, and then 14.29% was gasoline as well as kerosene. Kerosene was actually above gasoline for the fixed facilities. Kentucky was the most common state of origin for the shipments or what they were receiving. Others included Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, and Iowa were reported as states of origin, so coming from lots of different places. 10 different cities were reported, Louisville being reported most frequently, I'm sure due to the proximity, as well as Lexington. 50% of the cities of origin were Louisville, Kentucky, so a lot coming from Louisville. And all facilities reported variable of their seasons of shipment. This asks like what time of the year they ship, if they only ship in the summer or they only ship in the winter. Every one of the facilities, all 7 reported variable.